Welcome to Founders Future, a podcast powered by Closers.io, where we dive into the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and explore the road ahead for them and their companies. I'm your host, Amar Elm, and in each episode, we uncover the stories behind impactful ventures, the challenges faced along the way, and the strategies driving their future growth. Today, we are absolutely thrilled to be joined by Sean Johnson, founder and CEO of Madison, a firm that helps professional services companies turn their experts into trusted advisors through authority marketing and strategic relationship building. Sean, welcome to Founders Future.
Thank you very much for having me. Excited to do this.
I'm excited to dive in. I always like to start from the beginning. So take me back to before you started Madison. What were you doing beforehand? And then what was really the motivation behind starting the company?
Yeah, previous to Madison, I spent 12 years building another firm called Manifold, which was we called it a venture holding company. In the beginning, it was a product development shop working with startups. This was like pre-tech boot camps and all that kind of thing. So our early clients were startup founders that that were non-technical, that needed to get their products built. And over time, we moved upstream to enterprise as they started standing up innovation teams and things like that. They had a similar problem. They had a lot of business stakeholders or analysts or that kind of folks, but they often were lacking the design and software engineering talent. That was the advisory side of the business. And then we also had an early stage venture fund. We did, I think, 25 deals during my time there. Spent 12 years doing that. Spent 9 years during that time teaching digital marketing at Kellogg at Northwestern University and their innovation entrepreneurship initiative. And I think the way I described that season of life was that I was very much driven by kind of ambition. And it was like number go up. And it was important for me to be successful, young and successful, like that kind of thing. So that was kind of a dominant theme in that season. And I reached, for me at least, the end of it. We were a value add fund. So we tried to, when we invested in a company, they got access to capital, but also access to our team. And I think as a result of that, we and I got very emotionally invested in some of those companies. And early stage investing is really hard. We had a couple of exits, which I'm really proud of. But like any fund, a lot of those investments are going to struggle and not all of them are going to make it. And so running at its peak, a 70-person advisory business, and then coming over here and trying to deal with whatever dumpster fire was going on at any given time, it just became a lot. And I got pretty burned out. And so I was fortunate to be able to take some time off, stepped away from the firm, took about 18 months off, try to figure out what do I want to be, reflect on things I learned during that season, both about myself and about what do I want and not want in this next season of life. And one of the big conclusions was I had grafted my identity, I think, way too closely to my work. And Madison, as I tell my team often, is an exercise in me trying to reconcile ambition and peace. And so we have growth goals. We move a lot faster. I think we move like a startup, I think, in ways more so than a typical consulting firm. So part of that DNA is still there, but I want to do it in a way that gives myself and gives my team more life, not less, and allows them to develop their character and all that kind of stuff. And so that's how I got here. And then we can go into how I arrived at the specific service offering for Madison. But yeah, that's the gist of it, I would say.
For sure. I'd love to dive into that a little bit further because
Sure.
Professional service firms, accountants, attorneys, agencies, boutique consultants. You mentioned something that was interesting though, and I'd love to have you touch upon that a little bit further. Your identity was very closely tied to your work. Explain to the audience what you mean by that, and then also where you decided to shift your identity, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. I think I drank the startup land Kool-Aid around Make a Dent in the Universe. And I think what that really, in many ways, I think that is a narrative that wasn't coined by venture, but I think is put forth by venture. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with it, but I think it can create a lot of problems for folks. And I saw it with my students, a lot of them. I saw it with the founders that we invested in. You Make a Dent in the Universe is defined as create a company that is of sufficient size that it has a meaningful exit, and you are quote unquote successful if you've done that. And I think the problem with that is that most businesses fail. And so that narrative does not apply. And I saw founders who had exits, but they weren't big enough. Anybody that got acqui-hired, it was bad. Anybody that exited after like their Series B anybody that went through a down round, which often isn't even their fault. It's just a function of, sometimes it's a function of like macro conditions or whatever. It just didn't have anything to say to those people. It didn't have anything to say to all of my team members that are working on the advisory side of the business. It didn't have anything to say to founders that fail. It didn't have anything to say to employee number 5 or 10 in those companies, because like they played a role, but were they the person that made the dent? I had nothing to say to the barista that gives me like joy every day in the form of a legal addictive stimulant. And so it just was, I just felt like it was a bad narrative, I think, for myself and for most people. And so I wanted to have a narrative that was slightly more redeeming than that. And so what I arrived at was, I called it job, vocation, work, life. So job is what I do for money. Vocation is what brings me the most joy. So like I cook a ton and I've gotten quite good at it. But if I were gonna open up a restaurant, I think it would ruin it. I would hate it. So it's something I can do that gives me a tremendous amount of joy, but I don't want to make it my job. Work, I defined as the sum of lasting good I create in the world. And so that was helpful for me in terms of building into my kids, building into my team, cultivating deep friend relationships, service, etc. And then life was just the person I'm becoming. So character development and trying to become a better person. And so all of them matter and my job does matter. But I think unlike before, I didn't do it on purpose, but I think just by not naming it and not putting boundaries around it and not giving it the right box, the job will expand, because unlike all of those other things, your kids aren't going to yell at you if you take that call at 7 o'clock at night, but your clients will. Like your soul won't scream at you if you find yourself compromising on your values or whatever. So this time around, I made boxes and I slotted things into boxes, and I wanted to make sure that I have each. And again, I love my job. I spend most of my waking hours working, but the hope at least is that as we continue to grow, that it will, maybe unlike last time, not occupy a disproportionate part of my ethos or whatever. So
thank you so much for breaking that down, because I think it's super, super helpful for founders to hear that, and the importance of being intentional with where you're deriving your personal identity and your sense of value from. So
yeah.
I love that.
And especially for founders, because what are the scenarios? It's either gonna fail, and then you feel like you're a failure. You'll have an acquisition, but it's not good enough as defined by whomever. Or even in the circumstances where folks I know who did it, obviously, and they're very grateful, and they're like, it's an envious position to be in. But even for them, it's no longer your company. And a lot of times they have an incentives for you to stick around. You now get slotted into a role instead of a larger organization. You no longer get to make some of the strategic decisions in a lot of cases. And you're like, whatever, you're 32, let's say, and you have this exit. It's probably the best for most people. It's probably the most material financial outcome that they'll probably ever have. It's probably the most material kind of story that they'll get to tell professionally. And they still have 32 years left of their professional life. And so it's, who am I now? And who should I be now? And so it's, even for them, I think it's often really jarring. So I think, yeah, that's definitely true for founders in general.
100%. Let's dive into Madison a little bit further. I feel like we're pretty clear on who your ideal client is. What are the core offerings? What does that look like?
Yeah, so on the tail end of my time at Manifold, we wanted to professionalize the practice and move beyond. I had 2 partners, and everything was founder led from a sales standpoint. And so we wanted to bring in kind of a managing director layer. And so we brought in some folks from like BCG and PwC and stuff like that to professionalize the practice. And especially as we moved up into the enterprise kind of setting, we won clients, I think, because of our point of view. And we had a kind of a distinct lens that was informed by venture and by startup, that I think made us different than like the Deloitte Digitals of the world. So I think that to the degree that we won business, it was because of having a unique point of view. But often we would lose business to those guys just because I think they knew how to sell into that kind of organization and how to do business development and how to craft proposals and all that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to learn what their playbook was. And so we brought in these folks and did learn a lot in terms of how to respond to RFPs, how to submit large ticket proposals, how to land and expand relationships, blah, blah, blah. But one of the things that I naively thought when I brought them in was that they did their own thought leadership. And it was not true at all. Like they had this big apparatus that created their ideas basically for them, and realized that we needed to stand up our own version of that. And took a page from the some Andreessen post where it is every company's a media company. And so I said, all right, we're a media company now, and each of us is a channel. And so let's pick our lanes, and your change management or your health tech or whatever. And then I would hop on a call each month with them and we would just riff on, okay, what are you seeing with current clients, prospective clients, interesting things you're reading in HBR or whatever. And then they go back to work and focus on delivery. And myself and my team would turn that into thought leadership for them. And we made a whole bunch of mistakes, did a lot on trying to do like long form. And I think there's a place for long form, but for us, we weren't getting like the people that were coming to our website were basically people who already knew who we were. And there wasn't a ton of search volume for the kinds of phrases that the chief innovation officer at Xerox or whatever would buy. But we got a lot of legs on LinkedIn with short form. And so we leaned really heavily into that. And that was really effective. And I don't want to overstate it. Again, like those guys were great in terms of expanding relationships, but they weren't hunters. They were more farmers. And we tripled in revenue over a 3-year period of time when we implemented this process. And so when I got antsy again during my 18 months and was like, I wonder what I want to do next. First, I started by asking what I don't want. That was like at the advice of a mentor of mine. Because initially I was like, oh, I'm going to do another startup or I'm going to start another fund or whatever. And I was like, what do I not want? And I said, I don't want investors this time around. Like LPs, it's a lot of like cat herding and just can be really stressful. I didn't want debt. That created a lot of anxiety for me. And I didn't want business partners this time around because I just wanted to see what I was capable of. I'd always had partners before. And so I was like, oh, I guess I'm starting a services business. And then it was like, okay, what kind of services business? And I asked myself, do other boutique firms have this problem with awareness, with building awareness and with kind of the creation of thought leadership that's high quality and that, again, like the CIO at Xerox or whatever would read and find insightful. So not the kind of stuff that like a 24-year-old like marketing generalist would be able to create. Like you have sufficient domain knowledge, you write at an executive kind of level, blah, blah, blah. And it turned out that they basically all do. And so that kind of became the genesis of it or the kernel of it. And yeah.
What does the model look like? Are we working together on a monthly basis? Is it a 3-month engagement? What does that look like?
Everything's month to month. Again, this was informed from before. Innovation consulting was like 6-7-figure contracts. It took us 18 months to close. Committee sale. Revenue is super lumpy in those kinds of arrangements. Receivables are huge. Like we'd have 7-figure receivables, like especially around the end of the year, pretty consistently. And the stress of finding like the balance sheet and the income statement looked great, but the cash flow was like pretty intense. And so we had to leverage lines of credit and things like that. And it was anxiety inducing. And so I said, I want to create the anti-manifold in a way. So easy to buy, low monthly retainers, month to month. I don't want to lock you in. I want us to stay sharp and like we're delivering great. If we're not delivering, then I don't want you to feel forced to stick around. And then it's incumbent upon us to just do great work. And so, yeah, and we started with, we call it authority marketing, but it's basically the LinkedIn stuff for the most part, because that solves the most acute need that folks have. But the medium term goal is to be more full service. We call it marketing in a box for boutique firms. And we've got 4 clients that are doing that now. So we're figuring out how that works. It's quadratic in its complexity in a way. Like they all have, it's like different Lego blocks that we're putting together. But the goal is to build an organization that can consistently, repeatably, if you're a boutique firm and you hire us within, call it 12 to 18 months, your marketing, your business development operation is elite. And that's what we're trying to create. So it's like you have thought leadership that's deep and thoughtful and that you're really proud of. When people raise their hands, you have a really defined kind of business development motion for bringing those relationships through and closing more business. And it's an asset that, especially for boutique firms that have aspirations to get acquired at some point or something like that, it's repeatable. So that if you bring in a new director, you bring in a new managing director, like you have an apparatus for kind of making them a trusted advisor, and you have a business development motion that is repeatable. So that's what we're trying to create. But yeah, everything's month to month. We don't do long-term contracts.
I'm curious, with that goal and vision in mind, what would you say is the biggest challenge to making that happen? Is it more on the business development, client acquisition, sales side, or is it more on the fulfillment aspect of things, of actually being able to fulfill the services?
For us to fulfill the services, I'm not worried about that yet. I do think it'll get more complicated over time. I tend to be pretty self-deprecating, but I've had many people tell me I need to work on that. But one of the things that I do, if I have a superpower, I'm a bit Swiss Army-ish from a design. Like, I was a designer, became a writer, became an executive, etc. There's a lot that we can do from a delivery standpoint, and I'm pretty quick at standing up those service offerings. Not as worried about, I think I can give designers or podcast producers or whatever it is enough rails to do it. I think it's mostly on the client side. So the same problem that causes them to not create thought leadership also causes them to have difficulty not being a bottleneck in terms of reviewing deliverables and things like that. And I'm having to learn their ambition and the pace at which they move. I think we move at a pace that's a little bit uncomfortable for a lot of them. And so I constantly get nervous when we're shipping stuff and they're not turning it around in time. And I'm like, it's like I'm used to startup land where it's like you raise a round of funding and you got 12 to 18 months before you crash into a puddle. And that's just not their reality. And so I've had to learn to temper my sense of urgency. But yeah, I think it's mostly on their side, getting them to believe in what their business is capable of and to cast a vision of like we see a world where you 3x this thing or 5x this thing over the next couple of years. We see a world where average MD, like the average revenue per MD, goes up 2 or 3 times, and do it in a way that doesn't destroy everybody and burn everybody out. So it's a lot more on that stuff, like coaching them and advising them. They get like the strategy stuff for free in a way, almost in that sense.
I'm curious because I have a lot of agencies that listen to this. When it comes to the client acquisition side, how do you generate leads and bring in
How do
more?
we? It's a little bit inception-y. So we're building our engine using the same ideas. Like, so we don't do anything we don't tell our clients to do anything that we wouldn't do ourselves. And we're little bit unique from, we're not we're going to build a list of 10,000 people and send 5 emails in 21 days kind of people. We do what we call authentic outbound. So it's like, we will do outbound, but it tends to be very surgical. It tends to be thought leadership driven. So very high quality, some things that actually like legit add value to their life, or we won't do it. And so I want everything that we do tactically and strategically to be the kind of thing that like the CEO of McKinsey or somebody would say, I could see my leaders in my practice doing this. And there's this idea of being a trusted advisor, which a lot of people throw that phrase around. It's originally coined by a guy named David Meister. And I think if you really are trying to do it, it requires that you take a bit of a long-term view. And it requires that you shift. You don't do anything you are not primarily doing things for your benefit. It's inherently service oriented. And so basically the idea is, if I show up and I help people every day, whether they're a client or a prospective client or whatever, and just be as helpful as I possibly can with consistency, and not do anything that makes you think I'm trying to take advantage of you, or I'm trying to microwave a relationship, or I'm trying to be transactional or whatever, and you add time to that, and you make it a consistent and a repeatable process, but you add time, very good things are going to happen to you. Like, clients will come in, they'll expand the relationship with you over time because they trust you. They'll get on a phone call with you and they'll say, honestly, I want to work with you all because I like you as people. It's a very different way because we tried at Manifold, we tried doing the real hyper aggressive like outbound thing that you see a lot of. I think for professional services, especially if you're selling inside of mid-sized or larger organizations, again, like, I think the chief innovation officer at Xerox does not have a tremendous amount of patience for the quick question subject line from like the BDR rep. And especially with the advent of all of these tools, like the Clay and all these things, it's like the amount of proliferation with that stuff and the amount of noise, it's wild. And we're trying to zig in a way. So it's like, with LinkedIn, we know what some of the things are that you can do to influence it, but the lens again is like, if we told the CEO of McKinsey that this is what we did, would they be impressed, or would they be like, that's gross? And so within that, we'll do whatever we can and be as aggressive as we can within those confines, I would say. And so I think what ends up happening is, to answer your question, our approach is lots of short form on LinkedIn. We'll do long form on our website for people, but assuming that's people that are coming primarily that already know us and they're coming through us from LinkedIn. We'll do this authentic outbound thing, but it's always value added. We get people to raise hands through webinars and through in-person events, and that's the gist of it. So they book a strategy call with us, and again, we just try to serve and try to be as helpful as we can. And then more often than not, they're like, okay, what would it look like to work together or whatever? Or they're like, how do I know this will work? And we'll say, why are we talking right now? And
Yeah.
it's like they don't even know which thing did it. It's not like direct response. I've just been following you guys for a long time, and eventually I was like, oh, we should have a conversation. So that's how it works. So let's just keep showing up and keep being helpful, and good things will happen.
There you go. What is the best way for people to reach out to you to work with you?
They book strategy call either on our link, my LinkedIn profile, or on our website, which is hiremadison.com. And then we chat about their business, and we'll tell them if we can help them or not. We try to be pretty, because I've already learned that there's certain types of companies, certain types of professional services firms where this isn't great for. So if you're I don't know, like you're like a personal injury attorney, it probably is a little bit less up that alley. Like I had a conversation a couple weeks ago with a property tax attorney. It's like a once a year kind of thing. So it's like this works best in segments of professional services where you could picture there being like a university textbook, basically, of here's how you do this work. So compliance consulting, procurement consulting, certainly strategy consulting, fractional CFO, that kind of thing. Startup attorneys, we actually have a number of startup attorneys just because every term on a term sheet, there's a whole bunch of gotchas and things to look out for and blah, blah, blah. So there's an inexhaustible supply of stuff there, but it lends itself to things where there's lots of opportunities to do thought leadership. So,
Sean, thank you so much for your time.
yeah, really appreciate it.
Anytime. So that wraps up another inspiring episode of Founders Future. To our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to go to hiremadison.com. If any of this stuff resonates with you and you want to connect with Sean, hiremadison.com. And if you are a business owner, specifically a coach, consultant, or an agency owner, and you're really looking to scale your business and you want to enhance your sales and marketing efforts, visit closers.io to hop on a call with our team and discover how we were able to go from $0 to $30 million in less than 3 years. Until then, keep on climbing.